Welcome back to The Broad Perspective here on the Broad Perspective Network. We are preparing to visit with our guest today who is in the house, Joe Dolezal, which I can pronounce your name this time, Joe.
That's
I've been
amazing.
practicing. I know. Aren't you proud?
You do better than I do now.
Do I?
Yeah, when people, they say Dolezal and Dolezal and all this stuff.
I know.
I don't even know how to say my own last name.
So you're confused. I got it down, though. I've been practicing, you
She's
see.
mastered it
Yeah,
now.
I've mastered it, so it's good. It's good. Well, we're glad you're with us today, because this is part 2. We had a lot of requests to continue our conversation from our show a while back about the Upanishads and magic.
Because we got a little off topic last time.
Yeah, we did.
And so people wanted to
want
get
more.
the
Kinda
meat
timed
of the
out,
conversation.
Yeah, and I think we diverged off a tangent and kind of timed out, so we didn't get to
Yeah,
really...
we've been known to do that. You can ask any of our listeners on any subject. We've been known to do that.
Happens. It happens, yeah.
So is it you? Is Upanishad?
I think formally it's Upanishads. I say you because just sounds weird. So I mean, at the end of the day, you're translating Sanskrit into English, so who knows anymore? But I think officially it's recognized as Upanishads.
Upanishads, kind of like
I say
coupons
Upanishads.
and coupons.
Yeah, exactly. Is it coupons or coupons? Tomato,
know.
tomato.
Tomato.
Yeah,
I
okay.
agree.
Who knows?
So maybe refresh as to what that exactly is, and
Okay,
then we
yes.
can get into the meat of what that is.
Okay, so tell us, yes. Who
So-
are the Upanishads?
So the Upanishads are essentially commentaries on some of the most oldest scriptures known in the world currently, which are the Rig Vedas of the Hindus or the Indians. And essentially these commentaries consist of, the Rig Vedas, just for the audience knows, the Rig Vedas are essentially a series of verses which are a word which is called aphorisms. And aphorisms are just verses of truth, essentially, kind of like, Jesus said, seek and you shall find. That can be considered an aphorism. And basically the entire Rig Vedas is versed in such a manner where you get these successions of verses going down, down, and down. And then what happened as a result of that, because individuals in general, when you read a verse doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. The sages, the yogis, the sages, and learned masters essentially created book commentaries on what this actually means. They went into the details, what this verse means, why does it mean this, and they substantiate the verse. Essentially, they expand on the verse. And that expansion, that commentary, is really what today we call the Upanishads. Why those Upanishads are really phenomenally interesting is for a number of reasons, and we can go on for hours about them. But the most interesting facts about them is because these adages really aren't anything similar to what we could even constitute as modern religion, because it's not allegory, it's not mythology. You know how we have Christianity and some people interpret Jesus as being an allegory. Now, whether you believe that or not is one thing, but the point is we see these consecutive allegories, the myth of Hercules, David and Goliath. I mean, you just have these allegorical stories which are true. There are truths behind them, but unless you are, as they say, initiated into the truths, then you really don't understand it. And if you take those things for face value, then you can be heavily deceived as to what the real meaning behind it is. And the Rig Vedas and the Upanishads aren't so. They're basically certain statements like Jesus said, seek and you shall find, and it really elaborates and expands on that whole concept. This is what this means. This is how this relates to you. This is how you can better yourself. This is what your relationship is to your mind, to your ego, to your higher self, and ultimately to the absolute and God consciousness. So the Upanishads really are very significant in that respect, and and one of the things, just like the recent lecture that we did, we talked about the Upanishads and magic, and that's one of the things that led me towards it, is my brief experimentation in telekinesis, which ultimately led towards a lot of like Kundalini yoga, a lot of this magic, and then seeing the correlation between it, which I guess I'm blessed to say that the Upanishads really expanded on heavily.
You mentioned, and I think for clarity for our listeners, because there are some who may not know what the Rig Vedas are.
Right.
So can we just throw something in there to kind of explain that as well?
The Rig Vedas are essentially, there are 4 Rig Vedas in the Indian culture, and the Rig Vedas are essentially, I guess, for a lack of a better term, it's not exactly, but it really is the Indian Bible, if you will. It's kind of their source of religion. It's the source of their scriptures, and what it is, again, it is really just a series of verses. What it really is actually chant. It's music. It's supposed to be interpreted as music. You're not supposed to read it as a literal book, but rather you're supposed to chant it as kind of a as kind of a mantra, if you will. And what it essentially is the origin of this literature isn't known. Earlier, somebody had asked me where, what the accepted date of this literature is. Currently, archaeologists will say it's around 6,000 to 8,000 years old. That's what they will formally admit. realistically, my intuitive belief is that it surpasses this time epic. I don't think it's from this time epic. I think it's probably the remnants of Atlantis or maybe some
Lemuria.
Lemuria. I feel that it supersedes. It's not part of this time epic.
So it's a remnant left from
I think
a previous
so.
civilization.
I think it's a remnant, and I think what also happens if you study in the Hindu astrology, you have the Kali Yuga, which is we're in right now, and then the yugas before. I think the communication back then was a little bit more, I guess, if you will, more refined, meaning that they use more like thought communication, intuition, rather than spoken word. Because if you really analyze it, spoken word is a very degenerate form of communication.
Yes,
you really can't, even if you're good at articulating, even if you have a very powerful vocabulary, there's still certain things like, I'll just make a very brief example. If you say, I love you, if you say that to your son, to me, to your husband, and then to your dog, you basically said the same thing, but the meanings are completely different.
Totally
It's
different.
just
That's a good example.
Right, and it just goes to show how vulgar, how degenerate articulation or verbal articulation really is. And so what I feel is that when we refer to these ancient or more older civilizations on the face of the planet, I think that they communicated more telepathically. I think things were more intuitive in the respect of communication.
You were even saying the difference between Sanskrit and into English.
Right. It just degenerates completely, right?
Completely.
And when right now I've been studying the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. I'm kind of redoing because I've actually studied it before, and I'm kind of getting back into it. I like to study things, leave it alone, because I feel like your mind does something where it learns it more, and then I get back into it. And they even say that there's so many words that are just grossly mistranslated, and there is no translation. Like karma, for example, people think karma means like action reaction. It doesn't mean that. Karma, and then there's a definition of karma means duty. Well, yes, but that's not the full story. Then there's another one that means karma means action. Well, yes, but no, not really. Karma is it's a very they spend 500 pages alone just describing what karma actually means and what it essentially. What you can boil it down to is essentially the intention, like we talked about. We all essentially came from the absolute, God consciousness. That's where we came from. Something happened where we broke away from that, and then we have to take in a human form because we wanted to assert our individuality at a conscious level. This is much more than psychological we're talking about here. And then that consciousness wanting to assert itself in an individual form took the human body, and now we're doing experience. We're trying to experience certain things because intuitively we know we're that thing that we're trying to experience, but we've forgotten it, and so we're trying to experience it in the phenomenal form. Karma